Hi, thank you for joining us and welcome to episode number 7 of the series. My name's Benjamin Brain and I'll be your host for the next hour or so, and this is the truth about business. Welcome to The Truth About Business, where it's my mission to seek out real-life business champions and explore and share their challenges, their setbacks, their failures and their triumphs to serve as inspiration, motivation and help other like-minded business people and entrepreneurs like us to fast-track our own success. In this episode, we talk to Tina Clough. As well as being a fantastic award-winning entrepreneur and passionate businesswoman, Tina is the founder and owner of the well-known and highly regarded PR agency, Poppy PR. After quitting her job in the midst of the recession and starting with literally nothing, almost a decade later, Tina and her poppies are thriving despite not receiving the support initially of family and friends around her. Now, this is a brilliant story of determination, a huge will to prove others wrong, and a shining example of what can happen when you believe in yourself and are prepared to put in the work. Amongst many other things in this episode, you'll learn, number 1, the biggest mistakes businesses make when it comes to PR and how to give your own a healthy boost. Number 2, the advantages that Tina found of starting a new business in the middle of a recession. And number 3, how Tina got her mojo back after the difficult birth of her daughter and the misconceptions people have about women in business once they've given birth. And there is so much more. This was another brutally honest and candid interview with an inspirational business champion, which I thoroughly enjoyed and I hope you do too. To find out more about Tina, visit www.poppy-pr.co.uk or you can follow the team on Twitter at poppy__PR. You know, success leaves footprints, so let's take a walk with a great entrepreneur and PR guru, Tina Clough. Hi Tina, welcome to The Truth About Business.
Hello, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for joining us and thank you for being a guest on the show. For those in the audience that might not know what you do, can you give us a bit of a summary of what you guys at Poppy PR are all about?
Yes, of course. So, Poppy PR was established in 2010 and I set up the business after working as a journalist and also in PR at various PR agencies over the years. I decided that I thought I could do a better job than some of them based on a few different factors, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But in essence, Poppy PR provides traditional PR, online PR, social media management, event organisation and help with award submissions.
So you guys have got lots going on.
We do.
So you've talked about the various PR companies that you worked for there. Could you give us an overview of your career from the start leading up to the launch of the business?
Of course. So ever since I was a child, I always loved writing stories. So when I was at primary school and secondary school, I used to spend most of my time writing fictional stories. So I always knew that I would do something to do with sort of writing, be it maybe write a book or go into journalism. And I kind of had a career path from very early on in my life. And I knew that I wanted to go to university and I knew that I wanted to be a journalist. So that's exactly what I did. So I went to Nottingham Trent University. I studied an undergraduate degree in English with Media and Cultural Studies. Came out of that, absolutely loved university and went back to do a master's degree in print journalism, which was accredited with the NCTJ, which is the National Council for the Training of Journalists. And during that time, it was a pivotal time in my career because they encouraged us to write stories and send them to the Nottingham Post by way of getting those published and obviously making a name for yourself as a journalist. And I found during that time that I had a bit of a talent for this. And when I was still a student, I was getting front page stories published on the Notts Post website and in the actual hard copy paper. So as soon as I graduated, naturally they snapped me up.
What was it about those stories that led to them getting published in the paper?
I made some very, very strong contacts and I realised that I had a passion for talking to people and wanting to change perceptions and also make a difference. A lot of journalists go into that for the same reason, but I realised I had a bit of a sort of craft for doing that, as you will. One of the first stories I wrote that made front page was a lady who was elderly, and it was when the smoking ban was coming out. Shows you how long ago this was. And she was struggling she had a ward-needed flat and she was struggling to go down the stairs to have a cigarette because they were telling her that she wasn't allowed to smoke in her own home. And she just didn't think this was fair. And so we ended up writing a story about, is this fair if it's someone's own flat? And the argument was, if council workers are coming in and carers are coming in, then obviously they're exposed to smoke. Her argument was, well, this is my own flat and I pay for it. I'm also disabled. I can't get down the stairs to go and have a cigarette whenever I feel like it. And we ended up making a really big story out of it with lots of people's opinions. We spoke to some pro-smoking groups and it made front page. I realised after that I really wanted to go down the line of writing stories that kind of made a difference, and I wrote a few after that as well. And one of the other ones that I wrote was a story about houses being built on a floodplain in Trowell. I spoke to people that had been severely flooded over the years. Basically, the council were on about building on this floodplain, and there was lots of people that were affected by this, that had the houses severely flooded over the years on Trowell Park. And I actually wrote a story about it and I actually dug out old photographs of the flooding, and kind of the developing didn't go ahead. I think it has now, but at the time it kind of postponed it. People thought again about it and thought, is this a good idea? And from then on in, I thought this is really the career for me. And I ended up working at the Nottingham Post, and I was given the job as property editor, which was a massive point in my career, which still helps me today. At Poppy PR, we attract a lot of clients in the property and construction sector, and that is due to my background as property editor at the Notts Post. So I absolutely love that. The problem is when you go in as an editor of a newspaper, where do you go from there? And like a lot of journalists, I decided to go into the world of PR.
So you obviously had a passion for the writing, you had the qualifications with your university and your studies. Did you ever see yourself launching your own business?
I do see myself as quite a down-to-earth girl. I think the day I decided to launch my own business, half the people that I knew told me it was a bad idea. And even some family members didn't think I was doing the right thing. I think it came as a shock to everybody. I'd worked in a couple of PR agencies. Bearing in mind, this was during the recession. So the PR agency world was very different during the recession. You were going to work every day and you were actually scared for your career and for your job. People say that marketing is often the first thing to go. And the first agency that I worked at, they piled a lot of money into an office in Marbella and it went under during the recession. They made a lot of people redundant around me and they only kept me. The problem was if they were only going to keep me in the UK, I had 62 clients under my care, and it's just an impossible task to deal with 62 clients on your own. So in the end, the business folded and I went to work at another high-profile agency in Nottingham city centre. They were probably in their heyday, they were one of the biggest agencies in Nottingham. I went to work there, and actually that was what made my decision to start my own business, because I was going to work every day and it was a very stressful environment. People were worried about their jobs, like, would I be next? They were making cutbacks. And in the end, I went to work one day and I thought, I can't live like this anymore. I feel like I'm worried all the time. Am I going to be next to go? I was watching other people that were really experienced go around me. Directors were even leaving to start up their own businesses from this agency. And I just didn't feel very secure. And so I went home one day and I didn't go back in, and I said to them, I'm sorry, I'm leaving. And they said, why? And I said, I'm going to start my own PR agency. I was 24. I was only young. I had a mortgage to pay. I had a house in Ilkeston. And I think the horror on my mum's face said it all. I think everybody thought, what on earth are you doing? Like, you've just quit your job, which I'd never done before, never made a habit of doing anything like this. And I think it just came as a shock. And I said, I'm going to make it work. And I think when you've got the attitude of I'm going to make it work, I think you do make it work. And if you've got bills to pay, I think you'll go to the ends of the earth so that you don't lose your house or the other things that you've got. And that's exactly what I did.
So you basically put yourself in a position where there was no other option but to make it work.
Yes. And I look back now and I think, how did my 24-year-old self do that? Because now I would never do that. But at the time, I don't know, I just had this motivation that that's what I was going to do.
So the day that you went back to work and handed in your notice and then went home to tell your mum, had it just been a thought in your head up to that point, or had you actually put some effort into making a business plan?
It was just literally, I'm going to go home and I'm going to start a PR agency, and I had nothing.
And what was the journey from that point onwards to actually getting to the point of opening Poppy PR?
So Obviously, the Monday came, I had no job. I was like, what on earth am I going to do? Right, okay. I had, bearing in mind, I'd worked in PR and journalism for a while, so I knew I could do the job. I wasn't a business person. I was just me. I've always been quite outgoing and I've always been quite ambitious. So for me, it was, right, well, just get on with it then. This is it. So I contacted some of my old clients from the agency that went under because they were just hovering around with nowhere to go. And 2 of them got in touch with me and said, we'll come on board straight away. On day 1, I had 2 clients. I was like, fantastic. In fact, I was actually overwhelmed with the kindness of people. So one of my first clients, the legal deed poll service, a guy called Jamie Jackson, it's obviously a deed poll service, they change people's names for a living. He was amazing. He was giving me pep talks on the phone, kind of like, you can do this, come on. He bought me an office phone. He actually bought me my website URL to get me started. So I was obviously brainstorming about what I was going to call myself, and I told him my chosen name, and he bought my URL for me. Moving forward from there, I had a few contacts that worked in web design. I was like, I need a website. So I offered my PR services for free in return for, can you do me a website? A really basic one. Not very professional, but it was a one or 2 page website, and I got a website going.
So you had the basics to get yourself going.
So I'd got that, I got my office phone, I got my URL. I was like, right, I got my name. So then it was a case of, right, now I need some clients. Obviously, I knew how to get clients because when you work in PR, generally agencies will send out their PR people to get new business as well. They don't generally have sales teams, they actually use their PR people. So I knew about networking and I knew about doing my own PR, obviously. I set up my social media accounts and kind of I'd got started from there.
So we mentioned earlier that when you told your mum for the first time that you'd left your job to start up on your own, she wasn't exactly best pleased. Is there any family history of business owners that have maybe perhaps inspired you from earlier days? My
family is kind of split down the middle, I'd say. So generally, the women in my family are very traditional in terms of being housewives and mothers. And yes, some of them have worked. None of the women have owned a business. The men in my family, my uncle started a really big business over in Liverpool called Palace Chemicals Limited with a guy called Charlie Clapham. And he worked there for many, many years and he still has shares in the business. And then subsequently, a lot of my other family ended up working there. My dad got a job there when he was 16 and he still works there. Now he's one of the directors and a shareholder. And my granddad, although he didn't work there, he was an artist and he a draftsman as well, and he designed their logo, which they still use today. So it would have been quite easy for me to have gone and possibly worked at Palace Chemicals if I wanted to, but I always had my rigid idea of what I wanted to do. And half of me wonders if I've ended up doing what I do now because of my granddad, because he used to always say to me, you're going to be a writer, because he used to write stories all the time when I was a kid. And he always used to say to me, you're going to be the first person in the family to go to university. And I was the first person in the family to go to university. So I ended up thinking this is maybe how my life's been mapped out. So my mum was shocked. My dad wasn't as shocked as he probably would have been. He didn't say anything, actually. I think he probably thought, I think she probably can do this. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think if you don't take risks, you'll never know. And to be honest, although it was a really big risk, it's really, really paid off.
And how did you manage to maintain your own belief in yourself when you had family and friends perhaps around you that weren't as enthusiastic about the launch of the business?
It's hard. I think I've always known that I was destined to do something that was quite special. I think I always knew that I was going to do something. I also thrive off people telling me that I can't do something. So throughout my life, I've had people say, you can't do this, or, oh, you won't be able to do this. And that just makes me even more determined to prove people wrong. I'm not sure that's a good mindset, but I've just kind of worked even harder. And at university, I think that straight away, I was quite quiet in the beginning of university. And I think people thought, oh, she's not really going to be any good at this. And when we started writing news stories, I think I really took the challenge on board to kind of show everybody that actually I could really do this. And so I think I tried a lot harder than a lot of the other students on the course because I wanted to prove something.
So from the early days, you've always had that attitude of determination and a strong will. And when you first started out as a PR agency, how did you manage to separate yourself from the competition? Obviously, we've already talked about the first couple of clients that you had, but from there on out, what did you do to differentiate yourselves?
In terms of for example, moving forward and today, I think where we position ourselves is we're not the largest agency. We certainly aren't. I mean, there's some massive agencies in Nottingham, for example. However, we quite often go up against them when kind of there's new tenders available, contracts available. And more often than not, just recently, we have beaten some of the larger agencies. And I think that's due to a few different reasons. And one of them is because we're not a huge agency where you've got lots of people working on your account. People get to know us very well. So kind of if you've got a problem with your PR or you need something, you know exactly who to go to. You often find with the larger agencies, you can have 5-6 people working on one account. And then it's kind of, well, who's responsible for which part of my account? Another thing that separates us is that we really do make our clients part of our team and we are part of their team. So I know all of my clients. I know all of their wives and husbands and partners. I know what they like doing in their spare time. I know where they've gone on their holidays. Like, we take an actual active interest. Like, we want these people to do well. It's not just we see this as kind of we're taking them on as a client. Like, we really do get to know them. When I got married a few years ago, there were so many of our clients at our daytime do, because these people are now our friends, which is really, really nice, because you know you're doing a good job if you end up being friends with people. And another thing that separates us is that a lot of the big PR agencies, they do something called an hours system. And that is basically where they charge by the hour. My argument has always been I hate this hours system. PR agencies, they'll say it's going to take 30 hours this month to do your campaign. The problem with that is it's not very transparent.
They're going to make sure it takes 30 hours.
Exactly. We offer a deliverable system where I'll say to you, during this month, I'm going to write this story, this story, this story. I'm going to do this on your social media. We're going to update it daily. We're going to do these goals. We're going to work towards these targets. This is basically what we're going to deliver to you. If I was to say to somebody, I'm going to spend 4 hours sending out your story, how do they know it's going to take 4 hours to send out that story? It's a case of it's not very transparent and people feel like they're being ripped off, which, to be honest, I think some of them are. And again, my argument has always been, if you're doing an hour system and you say you're going to take 30 hours to do the job for a client, what happens on the 31st hour if the Daily Mail contact you and say, we want a comment from your client? I would be jumping through the roof to do that. I would be like, we're doing it. Whereas some other agencies, they might charge an extra hour, an extra 2 hours, an extra 3 hours. And I just don't think that's right. I think that you should be doing a job and doing it to the best of your ability.
So you guys are basically all about delivering results rather than just delivering workable hours.
We're about delivering results and not the work hours.
And the name Poppy PR, how did that come about?
When I started the business, I was like, where do I start? A lot of agencies at the time, so I did a bit of market research. I already knew really who my competitors would be. At the time, there was lots of PR agencies that were named after either people's initials. That didn't work for me. So my initials were TLC. Seems a little bit wet. So I thought I can't really go with that. And then if you drop the L in the middle, it's TCPR. So Top Cat Public Relations or TCP. So that didn't work. So then a lot of the other people in the area were doing names of things, like girls' names were quite popular at the time, things like Nelly PR. And at the time I was like, what on earth am I going to call this? So I didn't want to name it after me, because people often say, don't name a business after you if you want to kind of sell it. So I didn't want to do that. So I ended up naming the business after my little dog that I bought at the time. But straight away I thought Poppy. I thought Poppy PR, and it had a ring to it. Straight away I thought the branding's very strong. Red website, Poppy. And actually it has been massively successful because people always remember it. Like I said, the branding's very strong. Also, we've ended up doing some stuff with the British Legion, which has been really nice. Again, like with our charity hookups, we can do stuff with the, obviously, British Legion. November's a great month for us. It's like, and people often call all the women that work for me Poppy. We all laugh about it. But you know what? At least they're remembering our name. So I think it was quite a clever decision. Like I said, whereas you've got lots of like sort of strong named and initial named PR agencies, we're a little bit different.
So we've talked about your very early days in the business after giving your notice, and whilst you've not really had any experience in the business world, you were certainly experienced on the PR side. From those first 12 months, what would you say was your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge was probably the worry of it going wrong for me. So I was surrounded by a few people that were kind of saying this is a big mistake. And it was a worry in terms of, right, I've got some clients. What happens if those clients leave? what happens how am I going to grow this? Because obviously then I am on my own. I'm doing all the work and I'm doing all the admin and I'm doing all the new business. And I guess on one side, it kind of made me worry a lot. I had a lot of sleepless nights. I think that was probably one of my huge challenges, just learning to kind of possibly think, you know what will be, will be. We had some good clients and I'd already worked with some of them before anyway. So they kind of knew me and how well I worked. I think it's probably the worry and the voices in your head that say, oh, you might fail, you might fail.
And how did you deal with those voices?
You know what? I think because I was in a situation where, like I said earlier, I couldn't really fail because I had a mortgage, I was on my own, and it was kind of like, I'm not losing my house. Like, it was sort of, right, you've just got to get on with it. And I worked a lot of long hours. I mean, I realised that people say I work long hours, and everybody does when they start a business, but I really did work a lot of hours in the beginning and I didn't have much of a social life. I saved a lot of my money, so I was kind of like, right, let's save for a rainy day in case there is a rainy day, and I was very sensible around that time. I don't think I had a holiday for quite a while. I didn't go out as much as what I used to, and sometimes I did think, why am I doing this again? But I thought, no, I've got my end goal in sight, which is I'm going to make a go of this and I'm going to have a better living and I'm going to be more secure in this living. Nobody can sack me. I can go and take time off to go to the doctors if I want to. I haven't got to answer to anybody. And I just kept pushing on.
And from those 12 months, what would you say was your biggest surprise?
My biggest surprise was the amount of support that I got from people, which I am forever grateful for. It was something that I can still remember all of the people that gave me a lot of support, and I'm so grateful. And people that kind of really believed in me as well, because I kind of thought, actually, wow, a lot of people didn't, and you did. And yeah, I really do appreciate that. And the help that people are willing to give you. I mean, people gave me templates for invoices. People gave me information about new business. People gave me information about setting up a website and hosting and a cheaper hosting provider. And I mean, I even got offered some office space, for free. I mean, there was things like that. People said, come and stay in my office and you can just have a desk. And there was lots of offers like that on the table. I was really surprised. Again, that's what makes me kind of quite willing to give back now, because I think if there's somebody else in that situation, then I would help them now.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I found in life, and certainly from talking to a lot of other guests on the podcast, is that genuinely other successful people do want to see other people be successful, but sometimes you do just have to go out there and ask. You don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, definitely. I think if anybody came to me and said, I want to start a business, what can you do for me? Or what advice would you give me? I'm always willing to give people advice and to help them, because at the end of the day, I mean, there's lots of people that have got businesses or want to start businesses, and some people just don't have the belief. And I think if some of them had a bit more belief, they could really do something special.
So once the business was up and running, Tina, what was the point that you realised you needed to bring on board your first employee?
Right, so I worked on my own for quite a long time, and it was from the back bedroom of my house, like a lot of people do. I started feeling like after a good few years of doing it, it was about 5 years in, I started thinking I am getting a bit bored of working on my own. And I did wonder if, I didn't regret for a minute Poppy PR at this stage, because 5 years in, I was doing very well. I was making a very good living, and I was back to having nice holidays and bought myself a nice car and did all the nice things. And I was like, oh, money wasn't a worry and it was going very well. But I was bored with working on my own, and I missed company. And I did think, I really want to work with other people again. And it was scary, because then you open yourself up then to lots of other challenges. So bearing in mind, I'm not a business person, I'm a PR person. I learned how to run a business. It's going very well. But I didn't know if I wanted to change the dynamic, because as soon as you start hiring people, what happens if they do something wrong? What happens if your clients don't like them? What happens if they lose your clients? What happens if you pay them and then they leave after a while? What happens if you put all your time training somebody into sort of training somebody and then they leave? Anyway, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start having some people on work experience. Now, this is quite funny, because I had converted part of my house into an office. So in effect, a couple of people were applying every so often for work experience, and they ended up coming to my house for work experience, which was bizarre. And one of the guys that came on work experience was called Tom Birmingham. So he was at university at the time, Nottingham-Trent. He was doing the degree that I did, but he was younger than me, obviously. And he was so good. And he came on work experience, and he said, can I do a bit of freelancing work for you whilst I'm studying? And in the same spirit of wanting to help people, and I needed somebody to help me write stories, I said yes. So he used to work from home, and on a couple of days I'd send him some stories and pay him freelance, like some, and that was it. And it was going really, really well. Now, Tom was coming up for graduation, and I was just, I can't lose Tom. Like, what am I going to do if I lose Tom? Tom had been working for me for over a year. I thought, what am I going to do if I lose Tom? So actually, again, I started talking to other people that might want to share an office with me. And at the time, we came across a web agency, the guy I went to school with, and he said, I'm looking for an office as well. And I've got one person working for me. So I said, well, I've got one person working for me that I don't want to let go. And so we thought maybe the four of us could all move in together. So we started looking. Now, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction and thinking positively and kind of aiming for something. And it was very, very bizarre because at this time I hadn't previously been looking for an office space. But as soon as I knew I wanted an office space, I was like, right, okay. So I started asking around some of my clients. Bearing in mind, a lot of my clients were property and construction related. So if anyone was going to know someone that had an office space, it was probably going to be my clients. And one of them said, I've got an office in Ilkeston. Come and have a look. So I thought, I'm never going to be able to afford this in a million years. It was quite a large office. So I walked around this office and I was like, it was perfect. It was newly kitted out, had its own little kitchen, bathroom. It was large. It was like the size of a lettings or estate agency. There was only me four of us in it. And he told me the price and we could definitely afford it. I was shocked. And that was it. And a few weeks later, we all moved in. And the rest is history and we are still there.
Yeah, but like you say, the law of attraction clearly at play there. You have a goal, you're focused on it, and all of a sudden things that you perhaps may not have noticed before start coming into your peripheral, and it's like the universe is starting to deliver for you.
It's a funny one. I think that everything happens for a reason when it's meant to happen. I don't think I was ready at the time to kind of get an office before then. I think that I needed to find someone to move in with, so it was less risk. I think I just needed to be mentally ready to be able to take that leap. Again, when I found an office, I was met with even more people saying, this is a mistake. Like, even though I've been running a business for 5 years, people saying, why do you need an office for? Like, you've got overheads now. And honestly, it was quite stressful because I knew I was doing the right thing. And a lot of people are like, what happens if it fails? What happens if it fails and then you've got to pay your rent? And it was a worry. It really, really was.
What were the standout lessons from either bringing on board your first employee or moving into your first premises that you wish you'd maybe known back in the beginning?
I learned a lot of lessons during that time because I started off with Tom and then I ended up taking on a lady called Emma. I still talk to both. They've both got fantastic careers now. Emma actually works at Slimming World magazine. Yeah, and Tom moved to London to work in PR. And I think the lessons that I learned were just finding the right people is probably the hardest thing in the world. And there's been times where we potentially haven't had the best people. And there's been times where you're learning what people's strengths and weaknesses are. So my job went from just being a PR person to then kind of really sort of learning how to motivate people and realising where their gaps are in their knowledge and feeling like, I think I'm always approachable anyway, but learning kind of how you can sort of convey that people can talk to you if they've got a problem or if they're struggling with something without feeling like they're going to be sort of chastised or kind of shouted at, that kind of thing.
So did you find that you had to make any adjustments to your own personality or the way you act with people to enable you to bring more people on board?
I'm quite a patient person anyway. I think in the early days, I potentially was a bit wanting to be sort of everybody's friend. I think that was kind of a big sort of issue. Although I wanted to get on with everybody, I had to learn that there was also a bit of a line as well, and people had to kind of see me as, look, we've got to do a job here. And I think that was quite a steep learning curve for me. And I think I've learned that over the years, and I think now it's sort of people see me as kind of the person that's in charge, and they come. And to be honest, the staff that I've got now are absolutely amazing, and I've just been away. And as much as it pains me to say it, I'm not sure they need me.
And going back to the world of PR, what's been the strangest story that you've covered so far?
One of the strangest stories that I've covered was actually for the Legal Deed Poll Service. We used to get the funniest name changes you could ever imagine. And there was a guy that changed it. This guy from Surrey. He wasn't very old. He was in his early 20s. And he changed his name to Captain Fantastic, Faster Than, Superman, Spider-Man, the Wolverine and the Flash combined. That was his new name.
I like that. It's got a nice ring to it.
And he changed it on everything, like his driver's license, his passport. It was just ridiculous. It really was. Now, you might think that's unusual, but we used to get these all the time. People changed their name to like Fernando Torres, like his biggest fan that used to like wallpaper their houses in his posters. We had some girls that changed their names to variations of Madonna songs, and they were crazy Madonna fans, and they ended up donating lots of money because they ended up like organising this big charity event as well with their new names, and they donated all of the proceeds to her Malawi charity, and like really interesting stuff, really funny. And the national newspapers used to love us, like, so they would just, what have you got? Like, it was just straight away, we knew we were getting a massive story in The Sun, The Mirror, The Daily Mail. And it helped us to build a really good contact base because obviously we were talking to these national journalists, but also they were hysterical. And we ended up getting onto everything. Talk Sport Radio, News Round, everything you can imagine. The Sun, The Mirror, The Daily Mail, all the nationals. Like, people absolutely love these stories. It ended up taking us onto something a lot bigger and better. He decided to, because he was so successful by this point, that he ended up hiring Christine Hamilton to do one of his deed poll videos about how to fill out an application form. And during the course of this video, she turned around and said, maybe I should change my name. And we were like, ka-ching. And we said, what would you change your name to? And she said, Mrs. British Battleaxe. So if you Google it, she actually changed her name to Mrs. British Battleaxe. It was in all of the newspapers. It made TV news, but it was in The Guardian, and I've still got this. It said it was entitled PR Stunts of Our Time, and it was all about Christine Hamilton changing her name by deed poll, and I just thought it was hysterical.
And so once you've changed your name, if you end up not liking it, can you actually change it back?
You can for £10 apparently. So if anybody's thinking of some way to get into the press, it's a good idea.
I'm sure there's some light bulbs going off right now. What would you say has been the most successful story that you've covered?
You know what? It's hard how you define success. So success for me is something that either results in obviously increased sales for a client, because we are talking PR at the end of the day. That's the whole point. Increased clients, increased revenue, or something that really changes perception. And some of my favourites have been, we work with a forensic psychologist called Tully Forensic Psychology, and she gives a lot of advice on some really hard-hitting topics like knife crime, gun crime, terrorism. And we did a really important story that I think it's probably one of the most important ones that we've ever written. And it was about what to look for in your children if you think that they might be carrying knives or hanging out with the wrong people, and what to say to them and how to have these conversations. And we actually tied that in with a lady from Nottingham who had lost her son to knife crime. And it was a really hard-hitting story. We've done some amazing stories like that, and it's obviously raised awareness for her. It's been really important in obviously getting those conversations started. Those things have been amazing. We've also done some other amazing things as well. I mean, we went with Ian Hodgkinson to Westminster, and he got invited to Westminster to do a reception a few years ago about the shortage of bricklayers in the UK, and how are we going to build all the houses that we need, like the shortage of new homes. What are we going to do? Like, the government are pledging to build all of these homes, and they're not able to do it because they haven't got the bricklayers. And at the time, it was 250,000 new homes were pledged to be built, and there was only 250,000 bricklayers in the UK. So that's one brickie per house. So again, that helped to kind of set the wheels in motion, because then he started a construction academy, and now it's the Access Construction Academy over in Derby. And again, he's now training the next generation of bricklayers so that we can actually build some of these houses. So again, that's obviously transforming people's lives and obviously transforming the way people are working. And I think for me, those stories are really, really important.
And obviously, if done in the right way, it can be really powerful for generating awareness and, as you say, most importantly, sales for businesses and extra business. But from your own experience, where do you see most businesses going wrong when it comes to PR?
I think a lot of people think one of two ways. They either think in a very sales-led way. So they might think, right, I've got something that I want to sell, We've had this before. We had this with a coach travel company when they first came to us. They thought that it was a good idea to sell breaks and sell packages. And yes, while we can sell breaks and packages, it's about doing it in the right way. Bear in mind, this is newsy that we're looking for stories with news value. We're not looking for sales speeches, or if you want to sell something in a hard-hitting way, buy an advert. So it's having the distinction between an advertisement and a press release. And one of the things that we kind of taught them was, actually, wouldn't it be great to find people that have done amazing things on those holidays? So we found a woman and her partner that had sort of had over 200 coach holidays in their lives, and they travelled all over the place. We found a couple that met on a coach holiday. We found a couple that was celebrating their 70th wedding anniversary, and they were doing the first ever coach trip that they did on their honeymoon, and they were revisiting it. These are much nicer stories. They're interesting, and also you can sell obviously what you do, but in a more subtle way. It's about being creative and realising that the hard sell doesn't work. I meet with people day in, day out, and I say to them, why did you buy the newspaper? Or why do you subscribe to a newspaper on your tablet or on your phone? Why do you buy a magazine? And the answer, they sit there for a while, and they don't answer me for a while because they're actually thinking about why they've bought it. And then they say, to read the news, to find out what's going on, to read the articles. I say, do you buy it to look at the adverts? And they say no. And I say, well, actually, that's where we're heading with this. We want to write something that people are going to talk about. Think of a press release as something that you would talk to your friends down the pub about.
So let's say, for example, that we're talking to a new business owner that's just started out. The budget isn't quite there yet to bring a PR agency such as yourselves on board. What are 3 tips that you could give to that business owner to help them sort of bootstrap some sort of PR activity together and at least start to generate some awareness out there?
First of all, as I mentioned earlier, veer away from being sales-led. So think about something that people want to hear about. So if you're going to talk about, say, hiring staff, why have you hired staff? Is it to do with the growth strategy? Are you expanding quickly? Why are you doing that? Think about the 5 W's, which are the who, the what, the where, the why, and the when, because that is what a journalist will be after. Secondly, always give it a witty headline. So we love puns in our office. We have an absolute scream thinking up some of our headlines. We write them like the sun. They give everybody a bit of a giggle, and it really makes them stand out. When you email a journalist with your story, make sure you put your witty headline in the subject area, because again, that's the first thing that they will see. And also another tip would be to find out exactly which journalist you want to send this to. So don't just assume that you're going to send it to the news desk. Actually do your research, find them on social media, follow them on social media, and actually address it to them by name. Like, make sure that you're being personal. So if you're going to be writing to somebody over at the Derby Telegraph, say Derby Telegraph Business, address it to Robin, for example. Don't just send it a general hi there email. There's nothing duller than dishwater than somebody that sends a story that's written like that.
That's some brilliant advice there, Tina. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's got me thinking about how we should be looking behind the scenes to find more interesting stories rather than just going out with the sales pitch. And obviously you guys are experts on social media as well. So the same question again. What are some of the mistakes that you see businesses using through the likes of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and the many other social media platforms that are out there?
This is a bit of advice I heard from elsewhere. Not sure where I heard this. I've known this for a long, long time. But it actually applies to going to networking events, but I apply it to social media, which is, don't be that person at a networking event who, when you're having a really interesting conversation with somebody, they come in and they ram their business card down your throat and they say, I'm a decorator or I'm a printer. And that's it. And they're just selling. Like, people don't want to be sold to you like that, whether it's at a networking event or on social media. So make sure that you're getting involved with other people as well. So be interactive. Give somebody a bit of a throwback. If somebody's doing a charity event that they're really passionate about, retweet their charity event. Try and encourage people to sponsor them for their charity event. If you've got clients that are doing great things, retweet them. Make sure that it's not all about you. Like, obviously you've got to have your own key messages, but make sure that kind of you're sharing lots of content. And also as well, make sure that you're respecting your relationships, because journalists, although they need content, they are also helping you. And what's the harm in saying thank you to the journalist that helped you to get your story published? We always do this. So whether it's thanking just generally the Derby Telegraph or a journalist at the Derby Telegraph or say Ash Booker at the Ilkeston Advertiser or Derbyshire Times, we always thank the journalist. And you know what, you'll be surprised how many people don't thank journalists. They just take it as read that they're going to use things, and we really appreciate it. So kind of we will always say thank you, or say we saw the story, thanks so much, really appreciate it. Also as well, we also focus on using social media and also contacting journalists to ask them what they need. So ask the journalists what they need. Like, it's not all about you. Like, what happens if you contact a journalist and say, actually, I'm preparing a business feature on the recent budget. Can you help me? And if you help them, more than likely they'll help you when you need it. And you can use social media to do that. And you can obviously use the email function to do that as well.
So what are some of the benefits and advantages that a business should expect to experience by working with a team such as yourselves at Poppy PR?
The benefits are, I always say to people, a PR agency, if it's a good PR agency, should support you come rain or shine. So quite often people say, oh, we can talk about things anyway, like we talk about our good news. Oh, somebody can just hash out a press release. The problem is that journalists are very, very busy people. I've been a journalist, so I know how busy they are. And they're even busier these days because of some cutbacks. And also people job sharing as well. So if you think that you're a business that can write a story yourself, what you might find is, yes, you can write a story, but journalists are after content that is written in their style, that they can just literally lift and use. And so a lot of businesses fall foul of that. They don't write as a journalist would because, of course, they're not journalists. So we often find that they have a much lower success rate with this. They also fall into the trap of doing the sales copy that we spoke about earlier, or they make the big mistake of absolutely hounding journalists, whereas if you talk to journalists, they don't like that. There's a fine line between chasing something and hounding somebody. And again, it's a case of what happens when things go wrong. And things do go wrong in business. I mean, we've dealt with court cases for clients. We've had people that have been fined by the health and safety executive. We've had people that have been bad-mouthed on social media. And then who do you turn to put that right? And at Poppy PR, because we're all journalists, we've also got legal qualifications as well. So that means that we can handle things when they go wrong.
And one of the services that you offer, as well as PR and communications, is crisis management. So is it possible for a business to turn a crisis story into a positive story?
It depends on the level of the crisis. I know people say that there's no such thing as bad PR. It's true to a certain extent. If you do something absolutely ridiculous, then I'm not going to say that it's the best thing in the world for you. It really isn't. However, it's how you manage it afterwards. Bad things do happen. There's nothing you can do about it. However, it's just managing it, really. I mean, we've had court cases where we've been to court with clients, and actually I've seen journalists on the bench that haven't been using shorthand. Now, you might think, what's the relevance of that? But the only notes that stand up in court are actually shorthand notes. And shorthand is a bit of a dying art form. Now, at Poppy PR, we can all write shorthand. We can do 100 words a minute. Some of us can do 120 words a minute. Now, that importance of that is, if you're on the court bench, you can inaccurately report on things that are said in court if you're not doing shorthand, because you can't keep up with the speed that people are speaking. Now, in one of our court cases that we covered, a journalist came in and didn't use shorthand notes and later on published a story that was factually incorrect. Now, because I'd taken shorthand notes, I could then go back to that newspaper and say it's inaccurate, and they had to take it down. Now, that is the power of having somebody on your side that kind of knows about these things.
I'd never have guessed that a PR agency or a journalist would have to be qualified in shorthand, and how that's actually applicable and holds up in court.
People think that, they just go and write stories all day, and it really isn't the case. Like, to be a journalist, a lot of them have got master's degrees, they've got shorthand, they've got law qualifications, they've learnt about public admin, they've learnt about ethics. Like, they've done a lot of study. I mean, I used to do shorthand 2 hours every day, Monday to Friday. Like, we were taught that every single day. And then you come out, and the sad thing is, a lot of journalists aren't on very high pay, and it is really sad because it is an art form and it is a skill.
So up to now, Tina, we've talked about your journey to becoming an entrepreneur and a successful business owner, which is a massively inspiring and motivational story. But now I'd like to find out more about Tina, the businesswoman. So back in 2016, I found an article of yours online, and it was about the 5 things you've learned in business. And these 5 lessons were: appreciate your staff, educate your clients, time out of the business is equally important, get the best possible accountants, and finally, one that's quite relevant, promote yourself. all of which are great lessons, and I'm sure many other people in business would agree with. But we're now 3 years further down the line. Is there anything else that you'd add to that list?
So the staff one is the ultimate for me. I mean, there's been times where we haven't had some of the best people. Now we've got the strongest team I think we've ever had. Again, they can run the ship without me. It puts my nose out of joint because I think, nobody needs me. But staff, definitely. All my staff now are qualified journalists, which makes things so much easier.
Is that something that you find in many other PR agencies, that level of qualifications?
I think we're unique because we do hire journalists that have had a very long career as journalists. You do find that other PR agencies, they hire people with a marketing specialism, which isn't a problem. They also hire PR people. I feel like I'm going to bash PR people now, but I am a PR person. But you do find that some PR people, they can't write a news story. And I think that really does distinguish us because we write halfway between a journalist and a business person. I think you fall foul of being too salesy sometimes and more feature-led if you're a PR person by nature. Also as well, you haven't been a journalist, so you don't understand the pressures and what journalists are really, really after. And I think that the fact that we have all qualified journalists working for us, I mean, some of the people that work for me, Tracy, for example, she's had a huge career at the Hartlepool Mail and the Nottingham Post. There's no sort of story that Tracy hasn't written. So for her, this is it's just what she knows best.
And we mentioned earlier that you started the business in the midst of the recession, amongst all the other factors that you had going against you. How do you think that's played out? Do you think that's worked in your favour with regards to how you've built the business since then?
Yeah, I think so. I think because I started during the recession, people often say if you start a business in the recession, if another one comes your way, well, you know that you can survive it. I also found something very interesting. Although I said earlier that people often get rid of marketing agencies during the recession, it was about selling ourselves in a more nifty way. So we found some really interesting facts and figures online and also in white papers about businesses that actually advertise and market themselves during a recession, making growth 5 years after. And that was really interesting because when we pulled off all the reports and the facts and the figures, it was really interesting. And we did find that people that were really serious about business, they carried on investing in PR and social media and marketing. The reason they did that was because obviously their competitors then became invisible because they stopped advertising. And therefore, when people did need their services, who did they go to? They went to the people that were actually marketing themselves. And actually, we found that fair enough, there was a lot of small businesses that were kind of thinking, oh no, we can't do anything because it's really hard at the minute. But a lot of the bigger businesses, they weren't afraid to do this, and they've carried on making sales ever since, and many of them are still with us. So I think it taught us that actually if we start in the hardest possible time, then we can appreciate things kind of more. And if it happened again, I don't really worry about going into another recession. I call that silly, but I don't worry about that. And there's been times where people have said we might go into another recession. What's Brexit going to do? I don't even give it a thought. I just don't give it a second thought.
Yeah, I think you can soon become a victim of your own self-talk, particularly when it comes to Brexit and recessions. You start blaming that for everything rather than looking at what really has caused the issues in your business. Now, Tina, you're obviously a really positive and strong and determined person. With regards to attributes of what you think makes a successful business owner in general, not just yourself at Poppy PR, what do you think some of those key attributes and beliefs and mindsets are that do make people successful in business?
You know what? Someone once said to me years ago, your network is your net worth. And that is really, really important. So I surround myself by people that are really strong in business, people that are really trustworthy, people that are inspiring. I mean, Ian Hodgkinson, he's one of our clients, but to be honest, he's ended up being more of a mentor to me actually, like through the years as well in my business.
And how have you found those people that have forced you to raise your game? Because as you've said, your network is your net worth. I think a lot of people are aware of that. You know, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. But where they then can't work out how to take the next step is, okay, I know I need these mentors and these people who are ahead of me in business and are more successful and people that I can aspire to be like and look up to. But where do you actually find these people?
I would say that, some of these people that I surrounded myself with, it's taken many years to find the right people. It didn't just happen overnight. And we have been burned by people that we've used in the past for various things. We might have like bought a certain service and it didn't go to plan, or we might have had partnerships with people and they kind of like went by the wayside. But that's just life. Like you find that with friends as well. I mean, you might start off with friends when you're younger and then outgrow one another. And it's just one of those things really. But in terms of kind of finding the right people, I often find that by looking at other businesses that have been successful in your field, you can kind of build a picture of what they're doing as well. So where are these other businesses hanging out and who are they socializing with and who are they using as their suppliers? We often find that kind of looking at other PR agencies gives us a bit of a view. Not necessarily around here, but looking at London agencies is really interesting. And I know a lot of estate agents, you guys might well do this, Ben, looking at estate agents down in London and how they do things in their business models. And quite often, if you approach entrepreneurs online, whether it's through LinkedIn or the social media forums, they quite like to give you advice. If they're not in your direct competition area or location, they're quite happy to say, actually, this is how I did this. And I've found that a few times, kind of just reaching out to people and saying, look, how did you do this? There's actually somebody that I follow on social media. She's a young woman like me, and she's actually got a PR agency in LA. And I've reached out to her and I've been talking to her. It's really, really interesting. It's like a parallel universe, but she's like in a bikini every day and living at celebrity parties, which I'm not, unfortunately.
Now, going back to these attributes of what makes a successful business owner, now you strike me as the type of person who just has an idea and just goes out there and make it happen. And you either learn from it or you're successful. But either way, it's a win-win for you. Would you agree that's the type of person you are? You know, you described earlier that you had your business name, you had a very basic website, but most importantly, you went out there and you got some clients.
I'm a bit impatient by nature. And so I've always been somebody that if I see something that I want, then I will go for it. And I kind of get a bit sort of itchy feet if it takes a while to do. And so with business, it was the same thing. It was like, right, I know that I can do this job. I've done it for many, many years. People that are starting businesses, generally, they've done something for a while and they know they can do something. Whether they're starting an estate agency or whether they're starting a coaching business or whether they're creating a print business, they've been doing this for a while. They didn't just decide one day they were going to be a printer or they're going to be a designer. So you have to be aware of your own skill set and know that you can do the job. And I think if you know you can do the job, the next one is just, right, where do I find my clients? Because if you do a good job, people recommend you, and that's half the battle. And then you've got at least a starting point. And I mean, my business cards, they were absolutely rubbish, my first set of business cards. I mean, they were like pieces of paper. But at the end of the day, it was a case of, well, what does it really matter? Because all it takes is someone to use me, and then all of a sudden I know that they'll see a result from this and they'll stay with me, and then they might tell the friends. You can also offer incentives as well. It's something that I started doing quite early on, and we still do it now. Whereas again, if clients recommend us, if they're on a package with us and they recommend us to another client, we'll give them 50% off their next month's package.
And I think that perhaps a lot of us underestimate the power of referrals. So do you find that drives quite a lot of your business, your referral system that you have in place?
We get so many referrals, because why wouldn't you? I mean, I'm quite happy to refer people if they've done a good job. I like to refer people. Again, other people are like that. Not everybody. I mean, there are some people out there that kind of don't want to see people do well. But majority of the people, if they've done well in business themselves, are quite happy to give back to other people and recommend.
So Tina, you're now coming up to your 10th anniversary of being in business with Poppy PR. What would you say has been your biggest challenge so far as the business owner?
You know what? This is a bizarre thing to say, but in the early days, I used to hold on to every single client that we used to get like it was like life or death, because I was scared that we'd lose clients, or I was scared that we wouldn't have enough revenue coming in. But you know what? One of the biggest lessons I learned was actually sometimes it's better to let some people go. It is scary, but years ago we had this client, and I won't obviously name them, but they were always rude to me. They were always rude to the people that worked for me. And I used to dread answering the phone. And I used to think, why am I doing this? And we got them some amazing news coverage, like full page stories and trade magazine stuff. And I mean, the stuff we did was phenomenal. We'd done a really good job. And it was a case of there's nothing much more I could do, but nothing was ever quite good enough. It was either the photo wasn't big enough, or the caption wasn't long enough, or always something. And in the end, somebody said to me, another one of my clients, they said, let's get rid of them. I said, I can't do that. I said, why not? You're over-servicing them. They're making you miserable. They're making your staff miserable. They're not very nice to your staff. They hang up. They're rude. They're like, you don't want to work with this person. So why are you doing that? I was like, oh, they pay us a big fee. We know we can do a good job for them. Can't do that. Anyway, one day I thought, you know what? They're right. They're actually right. I could replace that client that upsets everybody in my office with somebody that doesn't upset everybody in my office. And I'm sure we can replace that client. You know what? We told them that we could no longer work with them. We're very polite about it. But we said, unfortunately, we haven't got the capacity to work with you anymore. And we let them go. And you know what? I never regretted the decision. I never did. And now I'm not afraid to do things like that. And I mean, we've got clients that, I mean, our clients are all so lovely. Like, they really are so lovely. And you just think to yourself, you're always going to find people in business that are rude. And sometimes you just have to look at it and think, do I need this? And if the answer's no, then you probably just need to take the plunge.
Now, there's obviously a difference between clients that have high expectations, and rightly so, and those that are disruptors, like you say, are causing upset to the team. So your advice to anybody out there who's in a position to be able to ditch them and move on and find somebody new to bring on board, you'd say get rid.
But when people are rude to you, when they upset you, and kind of you dread messaging them or emailing them because you know that nothing's ever going to be good enough. Funnily enough, when we let that client go, we actually found out that a couple of other people had let that client go as well. So it wasn't just us, and it did make me feel a lot better later on down the line that we'd done that.
And what's been your proudest moment so far?
Opening the office. Anybody that came to our office opening party, it was just, so we had this amazing opening party. It was packed to the rafters. So our office is a decent size, but we must have had 100 people crammed into our office. It's not big enough for 100 people. It was a summer night and everybody was outside. We had a big red carpet outside. The press turned up, the mayor came, and I'd planned all these things that I was going to say and thank people. And I literally sobbed like a baby, and I couldn't even get to my words out. And I was so embarrassed, and I still cringe about it now, because although it was a case of I was so proud that I'd done this and everybody said I couldn't do it or that it was a bad idea, that yeah, I absolutely cried like a baby. So anybody that came to that, you'll remember this. It was really, really embarrassing. But afterwards, lots of people said, you know what though, it shows that you're passionate about what you do and that you cared. And that is true, and I still am passionate about it, and I still do really care about it.
And do you think that's an important ingredient? You know, if you're going to start a business, it's got to be something that you're passionate about. You can't just be looking into something that's going to generate an income that doesn't really excite you or float your boat. It's something that really has to, you know, get your juices flowing, and something that you really care about.
There has been times where I've lost my mojo a bit, I'll be honest. I think everybody goes through that. And you think, I mean, when I had my little girl, I did lose my mojo a little bit. I think you lose a bit of self-doubt as well. And you think, can I still do this? Can I do all of this? But at the same time, yeah, I mean, you have to have a lot of self-belief. And yeah, I still have immense passion for what I do. And I mean, even this morning I met with a potential new client and they were like, you can see how passionate you are about what you do. And I am. There's times where I think, oh, it's really hard, because everybody goes through times in business where you think, oh, it's so hard, like not got a new client for a while, we've just got the ones we've got, but we haven't got any other ones. And you think, oh, sometimes you're kind of banging your head against a brick wall if you haven't got the right people in place that work for you. And sometimes you do lose your mojo a little bit, but I still get excited when I get a client's story published, and it's a really good one.
And what do you do to get your mojo back?
I think you have to then think about it logically, and you think, right, well, if I didn't do this, what on earth would I do? And the answer to that is, I don't know, because I've always been a journalist. I could go back to being a journalist if I wanted to, but would I? Not really. I wouldn't. I don't want to move to London and be a national journalist. It'd be very exciting. But again, I'm a local girl. I don't want to really move to London. It's not really me. And I think to myself, what else would I do? And I've sat there and I've just thought, I actually do not know. I think if I was to ever do anything else, I'd be an interior designer. But I can't see that happening anytime soon while I still love what I do day to day.
And do you read, Tina?
I do. I read autobiographies. I read some business books and newspapers, obviously.
And if you had to recommend one business book that you've read so far, which one would it be?
Always this answer I've probably told you before, Ben, The Secret.
And what was your takeaway from that one?
I really do think that it's about mindset. I think everything's about mindset. I think if you are all in the doldrums and you're speaking to clients over the phone and I'm kind of like, oh, hello, how are you? Like, I think people think, oh. Whereas when I talk to people, I'm kind of very much upbeat and enthusiastic about what I do and kind of very positive about what I do. And again, I've not really ever lost faith in my ability. So I'm fully aware that I can do this job. So I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to do it. And I think sometimes if you let negatives slip in, I think that's when you start having problems, when you doubt yourself and you go to meetings and you're doubting yourself. I think that you sort of slump in the chair and you kind of, people look at you and think, oh, they're sure that they know what they can do. And I think if you portray that you know what you can do, you're halfway there.
I think there's sometimes that misconception that people in business, particularly people who have been successful in business for a number of years, have that ultimate super self-belief in themselves and simply can't be knocked off the perch and have a concrete mindset. But actually, regardless of how long you've been in business, we all have moments where we perhaps doubt ourselves.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen? I often, nowadays, I look to myself and I think, what is the worst that can happen? I'll go and work for another PR agency. I don't want to work for another PR agency. However, you just have to look at it like that. At the end of the day, if you run an estate agency and it fails, just go and work for somebody else's estate agency. If you're a designer, it doesn't work, go work for some design agency. There's always something somebody can do. You're not going to end up with nothing. You've got a lot of experience under your belt. And for somebody, even if it did fail, you could always go back and work for somebody else.
So you've also mentioned about becoming a mum. Your little girl is now 19 months old. Congratulations. What are some of the challenges that you faced being a mum in business?
Well, I went through a bit of a notoriously bad time when I'd had Arabella. So I had surgery to have Arabella. And my plan was to take 6 months worth of maternity. And bearing in mind, we've got a small business. And when you go on maternity, you pay your own maternity or get statutory, which isn't a lot, as most people will know. So you have to then think about, right, can I afford to pay myself maternity? Because I've got to probably then replace myself because I'm off for 6 months. So you've got these considerations to make as well. It's kind of right, who's going to replace me? Can anyone replace me? And I think the answer is I don't think anybody can replace me, really. Obviously I started the business, no one knows it better than me. So it's quite a tricky time when you've had a baby. And I had surgery to have her, so I was out of action for at least 4 weeks. And actually I had a run of bad luck when I'd had her. I had 2 managers leave. So I had Arabella on the Friday. On the Monday, 2 of my managers left. And I honestly think that it was just a case of, a lot of people think that when a woman has a baby, that she's not going to work anymore. And I think that that's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think they generally thought that was the end of Poppy PR. I think it was a case of they thought I was going to have a baby and think there's other things to life and I was going to go off and be a mum and all the rest of things. And to be honest, there's a lot of women that do that and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But for me, I was never going to do that. So I ended up actually having to go back to work after 4 weeks. And it was really, really hard. I had to recruit from the kitchen table in my house at one point because I couldn't drive because I'd had surgery. And it was tricky. And I think that's the time when I lost my mojo a little bit. And I tell you what helped me to get my mojo back was my other half actually helped me to recruit from the kitchen table. It was bizarre because he was off on paternity leave. Bizarre, isn't it? Bizarre story. We sat at the kitchen table and strangers are coming in and sitting opposite us in our kitchen. God, I had a baby in the other room and she was crying and he kept going in and she was asleep and he was rocking her and it was like something out of a comedy sketch. But I tell you what, I don't think I ever cried as much in that time because I'd just had a baby and I felt really kind of oh my gosh, is this the end of everything? Everything I've built and I need to go back to work and I can't go back to work. And it was horrendous, it really was. And I find some people that were qualified, more than qualified, and I did go back to work after 4 weeks with the view of later on when they were trained, leaving again and going on a bit of maternity leave. But it actually didn't happen. I tell you what though, when I really hit my lowest ebb, one thing that really, really brought me back, there was 2 things. One of them was I'd gone in previously before I had little one in for a English Women's Award. We'd never won an award before, which is bizarre because we've been in for a few, but I think PR agencies, people think, oh, they've got the upper hand because they do their own form. Never won anything. And a lot of PR agencies don't win awards like that either, like the general ones. Anyway, I went with my other half to this do. I think Arabella was about 5 weeks old. And we had our first baby-free night. And I didn't take any staff with me because I thought, we're not going to win this. Anyway, I won. I just couldn't believe it. And I was just hadn't prepared anything to say because I just didn't think I'd win. And actually, it made me think, you know what? I think this is just the pickup that I actually needed at this point. Like, I've just had a baby and I've just won this award for things that I've done. And then I had another pickup later on. I ended up being approached by Nottingham-Trent University to help them with their new PR module. And this happened just after I had Arabella as well, which was a massive pick-me-up as well.
And leading on from that, you are the first public relations lecturer at Nottingham-Trent Uni. Could you give us a bit of a summary of what that's all about?
So they approached me and they already knew me anyway because obviously I studied there. And my old lecturer, Dave Welford, he said, you know what? You need to come in and talk about your journey because you've gone from journalism to PR. A lot of our students will be interested in that. And he retired and we ended up never doing that talk. But he passed my details on to a lady called Tracy Powell and she contacted me and asked me if I wanted to go in and be on an expert panel with lots of other people that had done the course and now they'd gone into other careers. So there was Corazon Garcia that now works in radio, her other half, Charlie, who is a sports reporter. There was a few people from the Notts Post, someone from BBC Food magazine, and I just sat on a panel and I was pregnant I was pregnant at this point, and I did this and it went really, really well and I didn't think anything else of it. And after I'd had Arabella, I got a call again and they said, we're thinking about doing a module to teach our journalism students the art of PR in their third year, just before they leave and graduate, because a lot of them will go into PR. We think that it's something that would be really valuable. And they said, would you mind coming in and helping us to develop that? So I did. And I went in and I was sat around the table. I just had Arabella, again, a big pick me up, and sat around the table with lots of other people from like the police press office and council PR department. And there was myself, someone from Nottingham Rugby Club PR. And we sat around and we just helped them develop this module. And they said, if you were in industry, what things do you need to know? Like people, if you were recruiting, what would you teach your staff? And I think I had the most to say because I was from an agency background. And I went in a few times. I thought, this is really nice. It was good for our own PR to be asked. And I enjoyed it, to be honest. And on the last session, I was asked to stay behind at the end. And I thought, what have I done? And she said, would you mind teaching it? And I nearly fell over. And I said, well, I'm not a teacher. And they said, it doesn't matter. You're from industry. You've done the job for all this time, been a journalist. You did this course. We already know you. And you do public speaking. So why don't you do it? And I thought, well, it really does depend. I've just had a baby. It depends on like how much time this is going to take, how many hours a week, what day. And they came back and said 2 hours on a Monday, which is nothing. So I thought, oh. And I said yes. And I have absolutely loved every single minute. And as a result of that, University of Derby actually contacted me and they said, we've seen what you're doing at Nottingham-Trent University. And one of the guys there, he said, come in and meet with us. And he then offered me 4 hours on a Wednesday. And I ended up teaching last term for the University of Derby as well for 4 hours on a Wednesday in between doing poppy PR work and running the business. And I've absolutely loved every single minute. And it was a massive success. We've had students that have gone into some amazing jobs. I've had really good feedback. I've absolutely loved it. It was putting me out of my comfort zone, but I loved it. It was great to give back, as I said earlier, and to really sort of inspire people to kind of go into this as a career.
And what was the motivation behind getting into the lecturing? Was it to give something back to the students and do something that you really loved? Or was there also an aspect that you'd be able to generate some additional business or PR for the agency as well?
I guess there's a couple of things that we get out of it, but really, I mean, obviously I get paid for doing this, but it was just to give myself a new challenge, and it was just to give back. As I've found out, we haven't got any new clients out of it, but we have had lots more students on work experience. Obviously, we've got a pool of great talent that we can pick from, but I suppose as well, it's cemented some of our relationships with journalists because they have guest lecturers in, and journalists come in and talk about being a journalist and what they need from a PR person. And so I've got to meet some new faces, some other journalists, make some other new contacts, but also cement some existing friendships as well that I've had.
And the thing that strikes me the most about that whole journey to becoming a lecturer is you just had your daughter, you were coming back into a business where two of your best people had just left. Now, you would think that most people at that time, being presented with being asked to be a lecturer, perhaps wouldn't have even considered thinking about asking how much time it's going to take, never mind actually doing it. How do you decide which opportunities are worthy of your time and which ones aren't?
I think I'm a bit too long in the tooth now for all of this. I think to myself that if it makes me happy and I enjoy it, I'll do it. If I don't want to do it, I just won't do it. Again, it's with other things. Sometimes we go in and we meet potential clients, and I think nowadays we might not gel with that client. And I'm very honest, and I think, could I work with that person? Can they work with us? And I think part of our success is that actually we are selective as well. We'll meet with anybody in any industry, but sometimes you might think their expectations are too sort of over the top about what they're going to get. If you come to Poppy PR and you say to me, I want 5,000 people to run through the door in the next month, I'll probably say to you, that's not going to happen. If you want increased brand awareness, lots of news coverage, and you want increased web traffic, then it's more realistic. I'm very honest about what you get from PR. Quite often when I say that, though, we send somebody's first story out and the phone rings and rings and rings, and they say, I thought you said this wasn't going to happen. And I say, well, I was just minimising expectations.
It's a good problem to have, though.
It is. But again, nowadays, I think to myself, I like to do things that make me happy. I like to take on clients that I know we can do a good job for, that I know that they will fit well with the way that we work. And also as well, I take on opportunities that I think will make me happy. I don't generally take on things that I think that's going to be a lot of hard work and it might be a lot of heartache.
And do you think that part of your mindset has changed since you first started in business? You've had to put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, years of experience into Poppy PR to be able to get to the privileged position where you are able to be a bit more choosy with the clients that you work with.
It has, yeah. If you, in the early days, you have to take everything you get because you really do. You're silly if you don't. But I think as time goes on, you just learn and you think, you know what? There's been times, like I said, when I've lost my mojo and then I've got it back. There's been times where we've lost some clients and they've later on come back to us. It's just a case of what will be, will be. And I think sometimes you have to just make sure that you are happy in what you're doing. Because I think if you stop being happy in what you're doing, then it's probably time to kind of find an exit plan. And I think that's really, really important to kind of keep in mind. And I think if ever there comes a day where I wake up and I think I don't want to go to work today, I think I'll know that that's the time when I have to give up.
We're coming to the end of the interview now, Tina, so I just have a couple more questions that I'd like to put to you. So if we could take it back to 21-year-old Tina and you were able to give her one piece of advice, what would it be?
Try not to worry as much as you're going to worry. And these sleepless nights are completely unnecessary. I really would. The amount of sleepless nights I've had over the years and the worry that I've had, I think it is a worry when you run your own business because it's not just you that you're supporting. And then when you've got a family as well, you've got your family to support and you do feel like whams if it all goes wrong. But I think I tell myself, you know what will be, will be. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about any of this. So the best thing you can do is go out there and trust in your ability. And like I said to you earlier, Ben, if it goes wrong, there's always a job out there that you can go and take for somebody else.
So let's say there's somebody in the audience, maybe a younger listener that wants to get into PR, maybe start their own PR agency, or maybe there's some parents out there whose children are looking to get into PR, but they have no experience or qualifications yet. What would you advise them to do?
A couple of things. Look at journalism as an entry point. I think that the best PR people have been journalists. I'm a bit biased, but I do. It gives you a lot of valuable experience. I'd also say look into some degree courses at maybe Nottingham Trent or the University of Derby because they are amazing at both universities. They've won awards. I would also say as well, get work experience. It's a bit harder to get work experience in PR and journalism under a certain level. So generally, we only accept people that would be college level or university level. So bear that in mind that you probably wouldn't get anything if you were at school. But I often say to people, if you're thinking about going into PR, ask around to friends and family. can you help their businesses? Can you write them a quick press release? If it gets published, you've got the workings of the beginning of a portfolio. Build a portfolio. So I often tell the students at Nottingham Trent University, you know what, just go and give your time to charities. There's so many charities out there that need a bit of PR. Obviously, they're relying on funding to pay for all these things. Go and find an individual, really small charity that would absolutely snap your hand off, write them a press release and send it to the local media and see where you get with it. You might get nowhere, but at least you've had a bit of experience. And if it gets published, great. That you never know. You might make a contact there. Also, you could put that into a portfolio for later on when you decide to go for a job or when you want to go for some work experience. So just start thinking now about what you can do and actually get some real life experience, because until you've actually been in an office doing this job, you haven't really got much of an idea of what to expect. So I often say to people as well, don't think that PR is as it is in Sex and the City, for example. I'm not Samantha Jones. I don't wander around going to celebrity parties and drinking champagne all day and like lying on sun lounges. I don't do that. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of PR people are journalists and they're very serious, and it's all about driving business, and it's about looking at statistics and figures and numbers. It's not about going to lots of like fancy parties. We've been to a few, but it's few and far between. So have reasonable expectations of what PR actually is.
Yeah, there's some really useful advice there, and I think it's something that perhaps many people don't think of. If you can't get an entry-level job at a PR agency, go out there and try it for yourself. Like you say, work with charities, smaller local businesses, family and friends, and see at least if you can build up a bit of a portfolio, which is going to stand you good stead in front of everybody else that's applying for these same positions. Yeah, really good stuff there. Thank you, Tina. So going back to Poppy PR, what does the future look like for you and the team? Have you got any big plans that you're working towards?
Nottingham Trent University have asked me to teach again. So that's something else that I'm working on at the moment. I'm also doing my prep because obviously university starts at the end of September. So that's something that I'm currently working on. We've got some fantastic clients in the pipeline, but also as well, I wouldn't rule an office move off the cards. We're currently talking about potentially moving slightly. There'll be more news coming soon.
And my final question for today, Tina, for any of the listeners that would like to find out more about Tina Clough or what you and the guys at Poppy PR do, whereabouts can we find you?
So you can find us on Twitter, which is at poppy__PR. Obviously, we've got our website, which is www.poppy-pr.co.uk. And we are also on Facebook.
Okay, great. And for anybody that's listening, all of those links will be on the show notes. So if you'd like to get in touch with Tina and the team, head over to benjaminbrain.co.uk and just search for Tina. Well, that brings the interview to an end. Tina, I'd just like to thank you so much for spending your time with us. I've really enjoyed hearing your story, your thoughts on business, and learning some tricks of the trade with regards to PR. So thank you very much. You've been a fantastic guest. Thank you for listening, and look forward to catching up with everybody next week on the next episode of The Truth About Business. One final thing before you go. If you enjoyed this interview and want to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode with another real-life business champion, make sure you subscribe via iTunes, Spotify, your favourite podcast app, or by visiting my blog at benjaminbrain.co.uk and hitting subscribe. At the blog, you'll also find the show notes to this episode, which includes all the relevant links to the website, social media channels, contact details, and anything else that was discussed in the episode. Just type in the name of the guest, and that will bring that right up for you. And finally, I'm always on the search for great business owners who would be happy to spare just a couple of hours of the time to share their business experience with our audience. So if you know of anyone that would make a great guest, or you'd like to feature yourself, just let me know. Send an email to hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk and I'll reply personally as soon as possible. Also, if you've got any feedback, questions that you'd like me to ask our guests, or any other suggestions, I am definitely all ears. That email address again is hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk. So that's it for this episode. I just want to thank you sincerely for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay hungry, stay fearless, get out there and make it happen.